Alright, what's up everybody? Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I did do some tiny upgrades to the channel throughout the week. I worked on the workbench build, and today I don't have enough time to do what I wanted to do for the video this week, which was finish this miter saw station. Instead, I did do a small upgrade. I added a vise over here to this side, and I've got a couple more things on a to-do list that I just need for shop functionality and future improvements. So today, you're just going to be hanging out with me, and we're going to do some mundane tasks around the shop, as well as one honeydew that I have for my wife. So, let's get started. I do want to add that one of the things that was on my to-do list for this week was to upgrade the audio for you guys. Now, unfortunately, the camera that I'm using, there is a bunch of loopholes that I have to jump through apparently. So you might see a boost in audio or in visual quality next week, because I think I have to get a new camera. So next week you should see a visual and audio upgrade for your viewing pleasure. So now back to what we were doing.
So when I have a day like this, I always find that the easiest thing to do is to tackle the biggest project first. So we're going to start by installing the vise. Now this isn't necessarily the biggest project that I have on my to-do list, nor is it even a big project to begin with. However, I've never done it before. So I figured it was a good idea to give myself as much time as possible, especially since I am limited on the time that I have to figure this out. So I start by unboxing this little vise that I had found, and it has 4 screw holes to go to the bottom of the workbench, and then it has 2 mounting holes for whatever piece of wood I'm going to use for the actual clamp itself. Now I, of course, went with pine because I figured it is best to use a softwood, so that way if I have a piece of hardwood that is already milled to my liking and I clamp it in the vise, then the chances of me denting a hardwood with the softwood is relatively low. I think that I'll damage the softwood first, and that won't cause me any problems. Now, I did run into the issue of I've never installed a vise before, and this vise in particular didn't come with any instructions. So I'm stuck just winging it. I did decide to mount this 2x4 just above or just below the top of my workbench, so that way I had a nice solid surface that could be replaced or removed if I needed to maybe trade my vise out for something a little bit better. I'm not opposed to upgrading a little bit later. That's why I picked a vise that was only $40. Maybe I can find something a little bit more fancy that maybe even needs to be restored, and I can give it a new life in my shop. But for now, this will do just fine, and we will be happy with what we have. So when mounting this 2x4, I didn't need to do any fancy joinery. I was more just concerned that everything was square. I did 2 pretty long, I think 2-inch bolts on the outside of each side of the cabinet. On the side closest to you that you can actually see the bolts, that is going to be hidden by the side of a drawer. And on the back side, well, the outside of the workbench is going to be the same color black that my outfeed table / assembly table was, and so I don't really think it's gonna draw too much attention. Not to mention that is facing the corner of the garage where nobody's gonna see it. Once I got that 2x4 in place, it was time to mount this hardware on the vise. It had 4 screw holes, So I used 4 thick bolts just to mount it to the bottom of that 2x4, flush against the edge. I will mention, and you probably noticed, that the end of the 2x4 sticks out about 1/2 inch. That gives me room where on the sides of it, it will meet flush with the face frame. Once I had this underpiece mounted, it was time to add the face frame that will just add as the opposite cushion for any pieces that I clamp in. Once I was done admiring that, it was time to work on the other part of the vise. I figured the easiest way to get these holes transferred over to my workpiece was just to slap on a piece of blue tape. This might be a good tip for those of you who are going to be installing a vise on your own. Just put a piece of painter's tape here. I took a sharp knife and just cut out the holes. Then I can peel up the painter's tape and put it onto whatever piece of wood I decide I'm going to use as my clamp. Now, if you didn't see the entryway video, I did announce that I was going to be doing a small little giveaway to the people who are following and commenting on my videos now. So make sure you watch that video, subscribe to the channel, and comment in that video's comment section, and I'll announce the winner next week. With my tape hole template complete, it was time to head over to the joiner with a nice thick piece of pine that I'll be using as the clamp. I always get a lot of love when I use the joiner, especially from those of you who have seen the workbench build where we restored this and gave it a brand new life. It works really, really well, and I did only end up having to pass it through once on the face for this pine. Now, pine is a softer wood, so of course I didn't have to run it through a bunch, but it gave me a dead smooth surface. I had to reset the saw, or the fence, to 90 degrees because I did get this better engineering square. So there was a slight adjustment I had to make. My other one wasn't quite as good, but then it was back over to my piece of pine, and this thing was working so well. It just cuts like a dream. I did have to do 2 passes on the side here, but I was all for it. The more passes, the better, because I just love using it that much. Now that was real time for the joiner. I didn't do any, well, I guess I did do a small cut, but I didn't speed anything up at all. It just works that wonderful. I did, however, cut out the rest of me milling that up. I figured I'd just show the people who love seeing the joiner. I'd show them the joiner in use, and then it was time to move on. So I did cut that long piece down quite a bit, placed my tape template on, and then it was time to start drilling some holes. Now I just used the Forstner bit, and I went all the way through. I did have some tear out on the back end, so if you're gonna be doing this, I highly recommend that you use a sacrificial piece on the bottom. I hadn't even considered it. I don't know where my mind was, but I knew I had to do too many things. However, the template worked beautifully, and then it was time to get everything closed down so that way I can set some screws, which I also did off camera. But this thing was such a pain in the ass to screw, I had to use a makeshift handle. Unfortunately, all I had was a piece of MDF, so I literally wore it down as far as I could. It kept breaking, and in no time at all, I was back to having to do it by hand. To make life easier on me in the future though, I did have this 1 inch by 1 inch piece of of walnut that was left over from a project, and I just used a 1/2 inch round over on my router, and I didn't go all the way down on one side, so that way I had a nice square surface to use as a reference for the tabletop that I was using. And then you just flip it over, you do all your corners, and then we'll go back and we'll cut the square piece off that I didn't do on the miter saw. That'll give us a nice round I was also really happy to see that on the first try, this was a nice tight fit. I actually had to end up kind of whacking this into place with the mallet, and that will save me from having to come up with some fancy thing to do on the ends, so that way this dowel doesn't slide out of that hole. I just tapped it in there and I'm leaving it in there. I'm actually looking at it right now on my workbench while I'm doing the voice recording, and it's sitting straight vertical, and it's not gonna ever fall out of there, not unless I yank it out on my own. Now I'll probably never take this vise handle out, except maybe to add some oil, which now that I'm thinking, I'll probably just do around the handle. So that handle, that dowel will stay in there probably forever. And the only thing left to do was to make sure that this thing did its very simple job. And it did. It worked wonderfully. It held it in place. There's a feature called quick release supposedly on some vices, and this didn't have that feature, but I can link it below for those of you who want to grab it. You can use the same method I used, or you can install it properly. Up to you.
Okay, so I use these little fast caps, and I figured I'd get one that was metric, so when I'm doing finer woodworking, I don't have to deal with fractions or anything like that. I can just come on over, and this is 51, I guess, 51 centimeters. And if I really need to break it down, I can jump over to millimeters. Now, the difference I didn't expect, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, is when I'm using freedom units to measure, when I need to measure, it's always ready to go when I am. But with the metric ones, maybe I need to prepare a little bit better. It's just sad and just kind of sad and droopy.
Next, it was time to head over to the newest edition of my workbench, the glue up station, where today we are using it as a place to keep all of our to-do bags, I guess. Right now I'm unboxing unpackaging a pack of weather strip. Now the weather strip I wanted to explain to you guys is so that way maybe we can get this garage climate controlled. That would allow me to do things like epoxy in the future. I don't think I'm going to be doing any river tables or anything like that. However, I do have plans to use epoxy for its intended purpose before the end of the year. I'm not going to go too far into that because it is part of a Christmas present for someone who I think is probably secretly listening to this. But to get started, we're just going to unroll this and add it to the bottom. This was super easy. You just roll it out, lay it down. I stepped on it a little bit to just kind of get the memory out, and it was easy to cut. I needed 20 feet. It said it was 20 feet. It probably gave me closer to about 25, 26. And it was easy to cut with a knife. So I just cut it to the length that I needed and stepped in place. And before I knew it, I had a nice seal at the bottom of my garage door. I did test this out later on by going outside and hosing down the garage door, and I didn't get any water leakage on the inside. The only thing left to do were these sides. Now I didn't have a big gap to begin with. However, I did at the bottom, and that's still not sealed. I don't quite know how we're gonna seal that one up. If you have any ideas, please drop them in the comments below because I am at a loss. Now the side adhesive wasn't anything too crazy, or the side weather stripping wasn't anything too crazy. It was literally just a sticky back. So I thought I was gonna have to get fancy and screw some holes in and get some self-tapping screws because the surface I have right here that presses up against the garage door is a sheet of metal. But I was lucky enough where I just had to use this adhesive back and put it all into place. So what you saw me doing was you saw me scraping off some of the stucco that was probably just overspray from when they built the house. And it never would have gotten in the way unless you're somebody like me who likes to do things that everybody else probably would never do. But here we are just applying the sticky back, and I did kind of pick at it a little bit to see how well the glue was. And I think it'll last. It had really good reviews on Amazon, so we'll see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I got 50 feet for about $12 because it was a flash sale, and so I'm not gonna be mad if it all just falls apart. I'll find something better. But that was probably my easiest task for the day because it was literally just peel and stick or roll out and step on, and it gave me a nice tight fit inside of these corners that 100% were waterproof. Again, at this little bottom section, there's quite a big gap. Give me just a second and I'll measure that for you guys. It is about 1.5 inches, so let me know what you guys think. The last important thing on my to-do list today, and it quite saddens me because I did give you guys my recommendation on those casters that I used for the workbench. These are brand new casters because the way that the workbench was built, it ended up exceeding the weight limit. Now I thought 400 pounds was gonna be plenty, but I upgraded these ultra heavy duty ones with a ratchet up and down that I think the weight limit is 2,000 pounds. So the other casters were probably about 20 bucks. These ones are about 40. If you can, just get these ones. I'm gonna build them into the plans so that way you can account for that difference in height, because the easiest way to the best way I can think of is to add them right to the bottom of the legs. Unfortunately, I was not able to do that. I had to add them to the bottom of that beam that goes horizontally that I have the car jack hooked up to right now. So that's exactly where I'm putting it, where I just showed you right there. And I'm gonna do it with this floppy thing. No, I'm gonna do it with a better tape measure. Just about 1.5 inches, I think. 2 inches is what I did from the side. Just enough where I can spin the caster all the way around and I'm not gonna have any issues. Nothing too crazy as far as math goes. And then I'm just going to pre-drill some holes and use those big thick lag bolts that I used to secure the 2x4 when I was making that crossbeam for the support on the vise. Again, I apologize for giving my recommendation on a product that I didn't actually end up using and that I pushed to the limits, but that is why I no longer have the link to that product on my website, and that is why I use those products first, so that way I can get rid of that stuff hopefully before it gets to you. Unfortunately, we didn't end up exceeding the weight limit of the workbench until after I had already completed it. And then I started having issues with not the caster itself, but the plate that made it a removable caster. Now I could have used those casters still, but since the plate was broken and I was trying to force it, I did end up not breaking, but just kind of tweaking one of the wheels. So I jumped on Amazon and the company was really nice. I told them what happened and they allowed me a refund so that way I could upgrade and get these casters, not by the same company, but that's all right. The point is that the important part is to note that I have fixed this problem now. I have made the adjustments to the workbench in the build plans, so you can follow these plans to the T and not have any issues. Now I did have to cut these legs down a little bit, and I had to do it to every single leg, of course, because what you do to one, you do to them all. I started the cut with the multi-tool, so that way I could get a nice straight reference line since I'm kind of at a weird angle, and then I finished it off with a handsaw. A little tip here, if your handsaw is ever getting gummed up or the friction is causing it to stick to the wood while you're cutting through, spray a little bit of WD-40 on either side of the saw itself and you'll get that nice glide again. This is also a good way to clean your saw blade because then you've got it rubbing against the wood fibers and it starts to look all nice and shiny. So maintenance and functionality all at the same time. WD-40 really is the world's greatest invention. It comes in handy so often. I would like to mention that I do have 10 of these saws, and I got 10 of them on eBay for probably about 30 bucks. It is a great place to be looking for old vintage tools. I got these because I wanted to restore them. However, I got about 2 or 3 that were ready to use right out of the box that they shipped in. And with that, our workbench looks a little strange, but it is back to being fully functional. The casters are kind of in a weird spot, but if you follow the build plans, yours won't look like that. If I do have any weight issues, I will add a caster on these middle sides just to help support the weight. I don't think we're gonna exceed the 2,000 weight limit, but that does it for that, and we're moving on to our very last task. This isn't actually a task that is associated with the workshop in any way. However, I figured since I had to do it real quick and it would only take a second, I'd bring you along for the ride. We have this really old hutch that we were gifted, and I'm sure I'm going to have to take this apart and refinish it at some point. But for now, we're using it as a bar until I can, on this very channel, build our own bar that includes a built-in tap and a mini fridge and a place where I can store all my whiskeys and my rums and the delicious things that I love to drink. Anyways, I'm getting a little bit off topic. Actually, I'm not. So, I'm fixing this door by squeezing a little bit of glue in and then reassembling it, and then I'm just gonna clamp it, and that'll be done for the day. It's time to go edit a video, which I've clearly already done, and then tonight, which is right now, I can do a voiceover, and then tomorrow you guys will get a video and you'll be so happy for the 20 of you that have made it to the very, very end. And now I'm just talking to talk because I didn't cut this part short at all for some reason. But I figure if you have made it this far, then you are here for the long haul. When am I gonna finish this? Surely this can't take too much longer. Okay, so here's my last bit of glue. We'll assemble this together, and then maybe, just maybe, we should do a jump cut so that way we can just get it in clamps and be done. Here we go, pipe clamps. So we're utilizing our glue space now for our actual glue space, which is nice because this is its intended purpose. It's not meant to be just a countertop like the other side of the workbench clearly is being used as right now. However, we're gonna do the storage very soon, and then all of this clutter will be gone, and you guys will see much more videos in the future that look clean in the background, and I don't know, that's about it. I did add one more clamp in the middle because I figured 2 on the sides was not giving equal enough pressure. Maybe it was, who knows? The more the merrier, I always say. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, this is the very end, then why don't you go ahead and subscribe down below. All right, friends, thanks for hanging out with me in the shop today while I finished just some mundane tasks that 100% needed to be done. The casters on the workbench will be linked down below, and they will also be linked on my website, and adjustments to the plans have already been made. Those plans will hopefully be out next week when you guys get the miter saw station video. And then the week after that, we will head over to the other wall and we're gonna get rid of all of this clutter here with some storage. Now the storage build, I'm going to use minimal tools so that way you guys feel like it's a much more approachable project. I know that things like the workbench, unless you have a handful of tools at your disposal, not everybody's going to be able to do those projects. But with the storage, you're going to be able to do it essentially with a drill and maybe even a handsaw, really, if you wanted to really rough it, I guess. I'm probably going to use a skill saw, but I'm going to try my hardest not to use anything I don't actually have to, so that way it feels a lot more approachable. Somebody is lighting off fireworks outside, so sorry about that. But I'll catch you guys next week. Don't forget to subscribe because we have other videos coming, and now they're coming every single week. So I'll see you guys next week.